There's just something about water, you know? Like when it goes down, it just feels like there's water in my body. Man, I don't know how they do it. Technology, man. So if you know me, or if you watched my first video, then you'll know that I've been a photographer for about 7 years now, which honestly dates back to when like I used to walk around my school hallways with my camera on top of my books, taking pictures for the yearbook. So with that being said, as somebody who has had like a lot of experience, and as somebody who just knows what he's doing, I've gotten a lot of questions about photography in regards to like how to get started, how to improve, just general equipment questions, things like a lot of questions. And I decided since I have a channel now, I might as well take that chance to answer a lot of the questions I've gotten, you know, en masse. So I put together a list of some of the questions I've been asked and some questions that I feel like would help a beginner photographer, just like a few of them. And I'll be answering those now. Question number 1, Canon or Nikon? The reason I put this question first is because I feel like it just gets asked too much. Like in this day and age, it doesn't really matter which one you get, because honestly, from a photography standpoint at least, they both are amazing systems. They both put out high quality images, especially on for entry-level cameras. What you get is well worth the money you invest. That being said, if it was like 3 or 4 years ago, I probably would have said, if you think as a photographer you're probably going to want to experiment with videos like even a little, then go towards Canon. But it's at the point now where if you know how to work a Nikon, then you can get good quality video on that too. So again, that just takes me back to the point where it's ultimately on you. If you have a lot of friends around you who use Canon and they could like teach you, how to get around the camera, then by all means get a Canon. If for some reason you like the way Nikon lenses look or something, then feel free to get a Nikon. It's really all up to you. It doesn't really matter which one you get. Question number 2, how much do you spend on photography and how much should I spend? You being me and I being the asker. I would personally have to go back to like my Amazon and B&H photo order history dating back to like 2013 in order to see how much I spent on equipment total. But just going off of camera bodies alone, I can say I spent about $2,500 nearing $3,000 just, on the camera bodies, kit lenses, just things like that. In terms of how much you should spend, especially as a beginner, I'll say not a lot. And the reason I put the should spend in quotes is because, it's less about how much you spend and more about the effectiveness of what you buy. So like, for example, if you see a $40 or $50 speed light or external flash on, some website, then by all means, get that, so long as the reviews are good. Always, 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 always read the reviews. And honestly, that $40 or $50 speed light or flash might get you more mileage than the $300 speed light on your camera's manufacturer website. So just always, always, always put effectiveness over cost, and always read the reviews. If you take nothing away from this video, remember to read reviews. But you're gonna take other things away from this video. I just really, I feel like I need to stress the read reviews thing. And following up, we have question number 3, which is, what camera should I get? That's kind of a loaded question that I tend to get a lot. And the first response I always give people whenever they ask me that is, how much is your budget? Because how much, you're willing to spend on a camera really kind of just narrows down what we're looking at. Because there's hundreds of cameras out there for you. If you don't give me a budget, I don't know what you want. But that being said, I can't give you guys one specific camera to get. What I will say is usually when my friends ask me, I point them in the direction of an entry-level Nikon. 9 times out of 10, it'll be refurbished, which actually goes back to my point about the whole cost and effectiveness thing. One thing you'll understand as you get into photography is there's nothing wrong with buying your equipment refurbished. And honestly, it's kind of like whatever you're buying it in its pretty much like new condition, but for a lower price. So if you see a camera body for $1,600, $1,700, there's a good chance you could see it refurbished for $1,200, $1,300, just saving yourself maybe what, $300, $400 sometimes. Question number 4, how did you get so good at photography? Oh, stop. Question number 4, how did you learn to improve your craft? Let's see. That mainly comes with time, practice, observation. Because even when I first started taking pictures, I would always look at the pictures I took and take the elements that I did and didn't like about them, whether that was like, you know, the foreground, background elements, angle, lighting, composition, and I would critique myself on it and apply that to the pictures I take going forward. And on that same note, one thing that I think is really important as like an aspiring photographer is being your own biggest critic, and also just never settling. Because when you settle, you start to become complacent. Complacency is the enemy of progress. You don't move forward, you know? But while we're on the topic of critiquing yourself, it's really important to separate constructive criticism from destructive criticism. So there's no point in like tearing yourself down while you're building yourself up. You know, it's important to encourage yourself as much as you critique yourself. So with those questions out the way, I want to leave you guys with a few tips that would have helped me or did help me as I was getting into photography. Tip number one, and I feel like the most important tip, as soon as you get your camera, the mode dial, hold on. Little mode dial that has like the little MASP, this is a Nikon, but like, it'll have, you know, manual, automatic, the auto, AV, if you have Canon, and just other modes. The moment you get your camera, rip off that auto. Like just get a screwdriver and like pry it off the mode dial entirely, or go in your camera's hardware settings and like literally just delete it because you don't need it. And of course I'm exaggerating, but the sooner you can get to shooting in manual, like full manual, the sooner you'll be able to have a deeper understanding of your camera and photography in general. There's nothing wrong with starting off with it from like a little bit, then going to aperture priority or shutter priority, but ultimately manual mode is what you want to get to if you actually want to be a serious photographer and utilize your camera to the fullest. And going off of that, we have tip number two, which is learn the exposure triangle, which consists of shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. These three things are like the main elements that make up like, you know, how a picture is exposed, hence exposure triangle. The sooner you can understand them, the sooner you will be able to have more control over how your pictures come out. And if you want like short, sweet, to the point definitions, shutter speed is how fast the camera shutter goes, like how fast that actuates. And that's measured in fractions of a second, or like whole seconds if it's slow enough. So like 1/50th of a second, 1/200th of a second, 1/4000th of a second, you know? ISO is the camera sensitivity to light. So the higher your ISO, the more light your camera's gonna let in, but also the more noise you'll introduce. Aperture, which is the one thing that a lot of people fall in love with, is what controls your depth of field. So an high aperture, which is a low number like f1.8 or f1.4 or f2.5, that'll give you a lot of light and a shallow depth of field to where it blurs out the background. You know, that's how people make lights, like with the fairy light pictures, you know, they have a little bokeh. And f16 or f22 is pretty much where everything that's in the frame is gonna be in focus for the most part. I mean, I don't really think anything, unless it's too close to the lens, it won't be in focus. But that's pretty much those three things, you know, just as they are. Just feel free to look them up and like look more into each of them so you can understand how they work and how they play into one another. Tip number three, apply to YouTube University. It's going off a joke that one of my friends and I make, but YouTube, honestly, if you utilize it correctly, like with all the tutorials and all the resources on it, along with Google, it's pretty much like you're enrolling in a university for learning the essentials of photography. You know, there's some things that they don't teach on the internet that they do in school, which, I mean, I haven't found anything yet, but I'm pretty sure there's something. But, you know, when you go on YouTube, there's like a wealth of tutorials on how to do so many different things. And if you just set aside time to watch those tutorials, there's a lot you can learn. That being said, I'm not saying like sit in front of a computer screen for 8 hours a day, frying your eyes, watching tutorial after tutorial, even though that's what I do sometimes. But you know, just like watch a tutorial here and there, how to get to know your camera better, how to focus, you know, white balance, just different things to help you understand photography better. I think we're on like tip number 4 now. Tip number 4 is don't be afraid to experiment in order to find your style in photography, whether that's street photography, fashion, editorial, portrait, nature, wildlife. Play around to see what really suits you the best. And you know, it may not just be one thing, because a lot of people I know, they kind of dance around in different areas, and that's okay. Just as long as you engage with photography enough to like find what suits you best, that's all that matters. Tip number 5, just like with everything you do, just be consistent. You know, there's gonna be days where you have high motivation, there's gonna be days where you have low motivation, but I think it's important that you find time to just consistently create. And maybe you don't have to create content from scratch, maybe you just wanna edit old pictures, but as long as you find time to just create something, and not even something that necessarily has to be put out for the public eye, just something for yourself, so you can, you know, refine your skill, practice, and just make sure that, you know, you're staying on top of your craft. Well, that was my Q&A/handy tips for those of you who might be getting into photography. If you felt like they were helpful, then be sure to leave a like or comment and subscribe so you don't miss any future updates. Peace. Also, slight update. I've been doing my best to make sure that like I have content ready for you guys on a regular basis, but I'm getting ready to move on campus now, which means I'm gonna have to like re-station myself, find out the good angles of the room, and just like, you know, resituate. So if you don't hear from me for about a week or two, that's why. But I will do my best to have content coming at you guys sooner rather than later. But until then, you know, until next time I see you guys, peace.